So to introduce myself, my name is Maiya Merrick, and I have two positions where I work with youth at various events. So one of the events that I do is Buttermilk Jamboree. That is a 3-day music festival. We bring in about 2,000 people for that festival, and they camp and stay all weekend. And I run the kids tent for that event. The other event that I do is, or the other position that I have is for the City of Hastings. I am the Arts and Events Coordinator for the city. And one of the programs that we have started in the city is a music series. And part of that music series means that we have a special series just for children. So while a lot of communities will have like Wednesday night music or Friday night music, we also offer a Thursday 11 a.m. children's show, which is really, really great. And I've been doing it for a few years. So I've definitely learned a lot about booking children's performers specifically, and what kinds of children's performers go over well and what kind of children's performers just kind of miss the mark. It's certainly a very different population to be able to perform for. I feel like to be a good children's performer, you need to be able to do a little bit more than sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So we'll kind of be talking about that. So let's get started. Okay, so first off, planning your kids' area. So a big thing that I want to make sure I explain to all of you guys from the very beginning, which is a mistake that I've made before, is that the event that I do when I do Buttermilk Jamboree, that is a 3-day music festival. So this is the type of event where children are arriving on Friday. Sometimes they are arriving as early as Thursday. And they are there all weekend. So their families are camping out for the weekend. So when you have that kind of a situation, it really changes what you need to do with the youth. Mostly because safety becomes a much larger concern when you have 2,000 people camping in a basically field, and it's very dark out. There are a lot of people. Children get lost. Children get, it just kind of happens. So this is something that we really have to keep in mind, is safety becomes even more important for our kinds of events. And I have to really make sure that I explain that to people before we get started, so they understand that we're not an event that just has kids come in and we're trying to entertain them for 20 minutes or an hour. We're an event that has kids come in and we're trying to entertain them all weekend. So we have a lot that we have to try to do to keep our kids' tent interesting and engaging for an entire weekend for the youth, which can get quite difficult. So let's talk first about planning your kids' area. So a big thing I'm going to say is to be creative in what you can have at your kids' area. Crafts are always a very obvious thing to offer, but besides crafts, what are other things that you can offer? Can you have snack time? Can you have playground equipment? If it is a very hot weekend, can you have a sprinkler for hot weather? Just really thinking outside the box for things like that you could put in your kids' tent. I realized by saying some of these things like snack time, obviously this was written pre-COVID, but I think sometimes it's good to just brainstorm different things that we can do. Obviously, I don't know if you can do all of these things post-COVID. So another big thing I'm going to say is to plan on having restrooms and a water source near the kids' area. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because kids do need to use restrooms. So do make sure that that is planned near the area. And then also for us, water is very, very important. When you have children that are running around all over the place, yes, it is the parents' responsibility to make sure their children are drinking enough water. However, we need to make it as easy for the parents as we can and make things like water very accessible for kids. We take that part very seriously. Think about how you can keep children comfortable if the weather is hot, cold, or wet. For Buttermilk Jamboree, we have experienced all three of those, sometimes in the same weekend. We've had tornado warnings at our festival. We've had times where it just rains and rains and rains. So if there are things that we can do to keep our children comfortable, that really, really helps out. It helps the parents, it helps the kids. Everyone has way more fun when that happens. And also think about all ages. A lot of times I see children's tents that are more for ages 5 to 10 without really expanding beyond that. So if you can, set up a special area for toddlers and children and tweens or teens. I've seen some really wonderful festivals that have special playground areas for toddlers. And then they have special areas for the older ones. I find that many times 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds like the kids' tent because they want to be able to still do some of those activities, but they start to feel a little too grown up for that. So one of the things that we do at Buttermilk is we actually have a special tent that is just for our tweens and teens at the festival. And we have special activities that are geared just for them at the festival. And that tends to be really great. They really like those things. And especially when it comes to teens, I'm big into keeping them busy doing things that you would like them to do so that they're not busy doing things that you don't want them to do. So choosing the performers, there's a much smaller pool of children's performers than bands. So be prepared to do more searching if you are booking multiple children's performers. That is so true for me. For the city of Hastings, I will receive at least 150 submissions from bands. Submissions I get for children's performers might be 2 or 3. So children's performers is something that I really have to go in search of to try to find different children's performers. So that's always a big challenge for me. The other thing when it comes to choosing the performers is events can be very distracting for children. So choose a performer that is highly interactive and involved with the audience. Now, when I do my music series for the city of Hastings, we have a small band shell, and connected to the band shell is a spray plaza. And it works out great when it's hot out. When kids get too hot listening to the performer, they can go play in the water and then come back to the performer, which is really wonderful. It works out great, but it does mean that when they are, they always have that option to leave. And I don't know why I did that. So that can be quite distracting for kids. So really trying to make sure you have someone that is able to keep your youth involved. And also one of the issues that we have with the music festival that I do is that you have a bunch of things going on. You have different stages that are constantly running. You have all these different people walking around. It can be very distracting. So to try to get a performer who can be very interactive and very involved with the audience, if you just have your kids singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, that might be great. But you really want the type of performer who can get the kids using their hands, get them up, get them dancing, get them really involved with what you are doing. Don't be afraid to take risks when it comes to choosing your performers. Some of the best performers I have ever had are offering very out-of-the-box shows for children. I have booked everything from a pirate that I did not really know what he was going to do besides pirate stuff. He ended up being one of the best performers we had ever had. He was wonderful. We've done some other out-of-the-box performances, and they have all done really well. So here I list some of our best ones, which have been hip-hop for kids, bringing in exotic animals, circus arts. Those have all been very received by children and their parents. Parents really get into it. And I always say, if you can have a children's performer that's not only entertaining for the children, but also the parents are having a good time, then you have secured a very, very good performer, especially because if the parents are involved, it's only going to make the children be more involved because the parents are being a role model for their children. They're showing their children that this is a very interesting thing that is going on. So we really like those. Choosing the crafts. So when I first started doing the kids tent at Buttermilk, I was told that I wouldn't have any money to spend on, I don't know why this is doing this again. I was told I wouldn't have any money at all to spend on my crafts or my activities. So I really had to look around and figure out what I could do without any money to spend on things. So what I started was by thinking about not what don't I have, because that's just going to make me feel frustrated. Instead, I looked at what do I have? Do you have access to yarn, items in nature, fabric scraps, someone willing to donate money or write a grant? I have used all of these things when especially when I started out. What do you have? If you have yarn, look up yarn crafts. If you have nothing but the nature around you, what can you do with the nature around you? I think that's very, very important, and you'll find that you're going to come up with some really great ideas if you just start to look at what do you have that you can work with. My example that I like to give too is every year for the City of Hastings, we do a Christmas event, and we have a little warming tent outside, and I have to try to come up with crafts that they can do inside the warming tent. I don't have any electricity. A lot of kids have on gloves, so any kind of craft that has a long dry time isn't going to work out very well. Can't be too messy. It gets really difficult to come up with activities that we can do. So one of the things that I have done with that is we started with a craft that was kind of like this. So it's just beads on a pipe cleaner. Went over really well. Even toddlers can do this kind of thing. It's great for their fine motor skills. Then the next year, because I don't have a lot of money, I did have leftover pipe cleaners and beads. And I didn't want to do the exact same craft. I believe you should always mix it up. So with pipe cleaners and beads, the next year, this is my small version, we moved on to these little icicles, as I called them. Again, it's pipe cleaners and beads. Then the next year after that, I discovered that we could make this type of a thing. And then the year after that, my example didn't turn out too great, but I discovered that we could do like a star with beads. So it's the same thing, same variation, but year by year, I was able to save money by using things that I already had in my box that was left over from the year before. When you're picking out a craft, remember that it's the process and not the result. You want activities where children play a large role in creating their project. You want them to be engaged in as many steps as possible. So an example of this would be when my son was a toddler, I took him to a craft that was titled rain stick making. I thought it sounded like a lot of fun. The volunteers did almost every single step for my son, to the point that when it was time to add the beads, a volunteer tried to add the beads. Well, that was a very easy step that my toddler son could do, and then he at least had some involvement in what he was making. Those types of crafts really are not the best ones to do. You really want something where the children are making it themselves, where they are engaged in what they do. Because while the result is cool and mom and dad may think the result looks nice, if the child didn't actually do it themselves, it's just not, they're not going to feel that same pride and joy as if they had a craft where they had actually done most of the steps themselves, if not all of the steps. So I really try to look at that when it comes to kinds of crafts. Maybe my volunteers have to do some prep work, maybe they don't. But if they do have to do a little bit of prep work, that's fine. We just want to make sure that the children are mostly involved. Warn your volunteers ahead of time that they might be getting dirty or the paint is non-washable. Do this before they arrive at the event. I didn't really know where to put that tidbit of information, so I put it in here. And this is something that I've learned from personal experience. Sometimes volunteers come in cute little clothes or their favorite skirt or something like that, and they just didn't realize that the paint wouldn't wash off of their clothes, or that they might be getting dirty. It happens all the time, so I always make sure to warn my volunteers ahead of time that they might be getting dirty. At Buttermilk, we do supply a volunteer shirt for all of our volunteers, but sometimes people come in with their clothes and they don't want those special clothes getting dirty, and so I do respect that. Also at Buttermilk, some of our volunteers will be there day after day after day, so they don't want to get all of their clothes dirty, and so sometimes they might want to bring something special to wear. So I always make sure to warn my volunteers about that. All right, so keeping kids safe. So like I mentioned earlier, when I do Buttermilk, we do have a challenge with keeping our kids safe. And it's mostly that we are taking it so seriously. We are going above and beyond. We want there to never, ever be a problem with the children at our festival. So, and obviously safety should be the #1 priority for any event. So one of the things that we do at Buttermilk, because these children are camping all weekend and it's nighttime, it's dark, there's thousands of people, there's music playing, children are going to get lost. And I'm sure a lot of you guys could think of a time that you maybe lost your own children. And maybe it just happened for a split second. You were at the mall, you just lost them for a second. But if you think about there being even more people at the mall and the mall being dark, it's going to happen. So we make sure that we are very aware of this. The other issue that we deal with at Buttermilk is a lot of our parents who come, they tend to be more free-range parents. This is kind of a time that they are willing to let their kids have a little more freedom during the day. We get children who walk up to the kids' tent by themselves without their parents. And while we are absolutely not responsible for children, this is a time where children can feel like they have a little more freedom. And if them having freedom means that they are arriving at a tent that is filled with volunteers, I think that's great. I think it's great to do that for our youth. So it happens. We keep the best eye on our children as we can. So one of the things that we do is we have a sign-in system for our children. So as soon as they arrive to the tent, the first time they come to the tent for the weekend, we give them, they have a wristband, and we write a number down on their wristband. And then we have a master list where we write that number down. And then we write down the child's name, we write down the parents' phone numbers, and we write down any other important information that we need to know about this child. So we write down, where are the parents camping? Does the child have an allergy or a disability? Those are very important, especially because obviously we get children at our event with disabilities. And so we're able to write things down, especially if we're talking about like a child with autism. A child with autism is more likely to run away from their parents, more likely to have a volunteer approach them than have them run away from that volunteer. If we have something written down, even just to know that the child may run away from a volunteer, you can better believe that we're going to be very careful with that child while we have that child in our care and while we are looking for the parents. So we think that's very important. I also make sure that all volunteers at our festival are aware of the missing child policy. It doesn't matter if you are a volunteer who's checking in people at main gate, if you are someone who is just doing backstage security, whatever your volunteer position is, everyone at our festival knows that if they see a missing child, look for the number on the wristband, and take the child to the med tent, which is where the med tent will have the list of children. We will then look it up and we will call the parents. We've done this so many times where we have had to call parents because the child became missing. It's just one of those things that happens. We absolutely do not judge parents when their child comes up missing. I have even been the parent who had a child that thought that he didn't know how to get back to the campsite. And so I had a child, one of my children was also one of those children to have to check the wristband and give me a phone call. It just happens. That's why I also say that understand that some parents may have their hands full with children. Be a helping hand to them so everyone has the best experience possible. You know, a lot of times when I do this type of thing, events don't want to have to try to worry about what they would do with the missing child. They just want to pretend that's not going to happen or blame it on the parents. Please do not do that. Parents have a lot to worry about, and we all make mistakes. Some other great ideas that you can do for your kids' tent. You can have a kids' parade. We like to do these a lot on Sundays. During the weekend, we might have the kids do crafts like making special flags, making musical instruments, anything like that. And then we invite the kids to come to the kids' tent on Sunday, bring the crafts that they made, and do a kids parade. That's a lot of fun. If you have someone who is willing to lead that, that's great. So other ideas, like I said, doing snack time, offering free snacks. That's something that's just fun for the kids. The parents feel really good about that. We enjoy doing things like that. Fill kiddie pools with toys. That is great for toddlers. So we have some old kiddie pools. The great thing is that they do not even have to be able to hold water anymore. But it's a great way to keep your toys contained in a certain area so that they're not ending up all over your kids' tent or ending up in the grass and ending up lost. So that's something that we really like to do, and the toddlers really like that especially. Decorate to keep the area fun. I have another slide where you can see some of the simple decorations that we've done in our kids' tent. Build simple playground equipment. So you can see in the corner, it's a little shady because we had a tent over it. But that is our sandbox that we had some volunteers build for us. We gave them free festival tickets and meals during the weekend. And they came in with this hand-cut lumber that they did themselves, and they made us a sandbox, which is really, really cool. It's gotten so much use. And what's great about the sandbox is that when our kids' tent is not open, like when it's early in the morning and the volunteers haven't arrived yet, or it's kind of getting late in the evening, there's always a place where kids can go to play. So also having bubble stations, we have lots of different containers of bubbles all over our kids' tent, which is really fun. And it just makes it kind of neat when you see a kids' tent, there's bubbles all over. And then a dress-up area, we took a bunch of old dress-up clothes, asked people to donate us clothes, and that's how we created our dress-up area. It was free, and it's really fun. It gets a lot of use out of it, so we enjoy that. So here is just a picture of the kids' tent that we have at Buttermilk. That's actually my son in the green shirt. And so if you look in this picture, anyone who is wearing a red volunteer shirt, you can see that we have a couple of volunteers. So we do keep our tent quite full of volunteers, quite well staffed. Although this is a time where things are a little slow at the kids' tent. A lot of times we do have more kids. And then you can see in the background, we have just tie-dyed sheets. Those were all bed sheets that were donated to us, and then I just went ahead and tie-dyed them. The cardboard that you see stacked up, that later became totem poles during the weekend. So this was the first day of the event. You can also see that I buy flannel-backed tablecloths from thrift stores, and then I put those on the tables, mostly because that way we can protect the tables that we are renting. So I highly recommend doing something like that. It really does work out well. So And then it just makes the area look a little more fun. And then also in the background, you can see that we have an art easel. So just anything like that we can put out just for the kids to do while they're hanging out at the kids' tent. That tends to be a lot of fun. So, all right. So now I'm going to talk about making your entire event family friendly. And this is because I have been to a couple of events that had a really great kids area, but maybe they weren't so great for the parents to also be there. So a big thing I'm going to say is to ask the parents, what are things we could do that would make it easier for you while you are here? A lot of parents will come up with things. I once had a friend who said that she just had troubles getting her kids to settle down at nighttime. They were just riled up and excited. So we started having free books at our kids' tent that parents could take home for the evening. And obviously they were books that I didn't care if they never came back. But it's just an extra little thing that you can do to help out the parents and to make their entire experience more enjoyable. Just like things like Disney World would do. They do lots of things to try to keep the experience as enjoyable as possible at all times for people. Keep noise levels safe. This is a big thing that I've had to talk about. So if we want to have this family-friendly event where children can come with their parents and enjoy themselves, which is really great. But if the main stage music is too loud for children, that's not really going to be something that children can enjoy with their parents. So sometimes I'm looking at other parts of the festival to see how the festival can just be great for kids in different ways, not just when the kids are at the kids' tent. Have food vendors offer healthy, kid-friendly food. If you've ever have been to an event and you can't find something healthy or you can't find something that your kids will eat, that's kind of a problem. And we really need to think about this population of children. So one of the things that we really like to have at our festival is some handmade pizza. Kids like pizza. It's not the healthiest food, but it's also not the most unhealthiest food. So just things like that, so that kids can also eat, and so that parents are less stressed out trying to get something that kids might eat. Find ways to entertain kids during the down times. So this could be like if you are doing a festival and you have bands playing all the time. What do you have going on in between the bands? Is there anything going on the stage at that time? Is there something you could bring out? So we did this with a festival that I was putting on where we had a half-hour, 45-minute break in between the bands. And for kids, half an hour, 45 minutes feels like it's so long. So what we did was we started to bring in performers like dancers and things like that to help keep it more fun and to really just limit those downtimes. Think outside of the box. The best ideas are those that have never been attempted. If you have an idea and you've never seen it at another festival, that is the best time to try it for your festival. Maybe it will completely flop. Maybe it won't. If it flops, you just won't do it next year. That's no big deal. If it doesn't flop and ends up being a huge success, then from now on, you're going to want to do that. And again, look at every aspect of your festival, not just the kids' tent. What are things you can do to make your event more accessible for children? So then let's talk about the millennial parent, because I'm actually a millennial, even though I am in my late 30s. I have 2 children. So really think about that. A lot of times I see events that tout themselves as being family friendly, and they are family friendly. However, it seems like it's an event that's more geared towards my parents and my parents' age and the kind of bands my parents would listen to, not necessarily me. That's fine if you have grandma and grandpa that can come to your event. Maybe they'll bring their grandkids. But you're probably going to be more successful if you can have an event that's geared more towards the millennials, and then that's actually how you're going to bring the kids into the event, because the millennials are parents now and they will bring their kids with them. So what are things that these millennial parents usually want? Millennials tend to want to focus their energy on events rather than things. So kind of think about that. Millennial parents do want to get out there and do things. Parents want to enjoy events with their kids. So having activities like family yoga, family hike, family dance, those are all very popular activities. I don't know why my screen's doing this. So offer things like that in your program. Really make it said that this is something that parents can do with their kids. Things like a family yoga too are great, because then they're coming to your event or your festival and they're learning these new things that are really fun to do, and then they're going to go home and do them. And if they go home and do them, they'll remember that they learned how to do that at your event. And therefore, maybe they're going to remember to come to your event the next year. And remember that parents also want to take a break at times. So if you can take the kids for a few minutes for an activity, go ahead and do that. If you're able to have chairs where parents can sit down and you entertain the kids for a minute, go ahead and do that. That can feel really wonderful for parents, especially if they're feeling very tired or overwhelmed at that moment, for them to be able to sit down for a second and breathe while someone else entertains their kids or while their kid does something fun. That's enjoyable. And then also remember, especially with today's climate, is that many millennial parents are actually quite cash strapped. So charging extra for children's events can feel annoying. And I am sure we have all been in those situations where we take our kids to an event that we think is going to be wonderful and child friendly, and then we get there and we see that all the children's activities are an extra fee. That's very annoying as a parent. And frustrating. So if you can have a bunch of activities that don't require an extra fee, I really recommend doing that, especially because some children will have the parents who just never have the money to be able to spend on those extra activities. So I recommend trying to avoid those types of activities if you can. Obviously, there are many times where you're unable to do that, but if you can lump it all into one fee or something, then I would go ahead and do that. Yeah, so I'll kind of just keep on talking because I whipped through that so fast without being able to see people in the room. So as in terms of other activity ideas or places where you can find activities, other big suggestions I have are before your event starts, if you're doing crafts, and I have been guilty of doing this many times, instead of just seeing a craft on paper that looks like it's going to be great and throwing it out there for people to do, it's definitely a good idea to make examples ahead of time. Something that I've learned is that I assume when I have volunteers, if I give them a craft idea, they'll be able to just do that. Something I've learned is that not everyone has that kind of mind when they arrive at the kids' tent. So a big thing that I have been working on is making sure I have an example ahead of time ready to go, so that when I need a volunteer to do something or when I need a volunteer to lead it, they have that example. I also try to have children do the activity ahead of time to make sure that I have an activity that children can actually do. I think that's very, very important. I have made that mistake many times where I think it's something that a child can handle, and then it ends up being something that a child cannot handle at all. So really be aware that if you can have a time where you invite some kids over to your house and have them try out all of the activities. I've done that before with my daughter, and then she is more than willing. She arrives to that event with the examples that she made ahead of time, and she's so excited to be able to show the volunteers what it is that they're going to be making. And what I always find funny about that is that my daughter is like 6 or 7 years old when she is arriving, and so excited to show the other volunteers that she knows what's going on. So things like that are so important. Make sure that you know ahead of time what you're going to be doing, and make sure that your youth can do that. If they can't find another activity that they can do, I think that's quite important. Another thing that I really try to do and to work on is, oh, now I lost my train of thought. Yeah, and another thing that I really try to think about is there are some events that I've been to year after year, and year after year, it's the exact same activity every single time. That's cool and all, like I said, but if this is your activity year after year after year, as a parent, how many of these Christmas ornaments do you really want on your Christmas tree? Are you really that excited when your kid makes the exact same craft that they made last year and the year before that and the year before that? It's just not as much fun as trying to do something different every year. I would say it's okay if you're putting out 10 crafts and next year you bring back the 2 most exciting crafts, the 2 most popular crafts, but then try to bring in other things as well, something that is different, because parents like to see different things. It just makes it more exciting. One event in particular that I've been to, that I won't mention it, has a teen young adult area with crafts offered, and they have done the exact same crafts since they first started in the year 2000. When you're trying to be this progressive, cool event for young people, but you've done the exact same thing for 20 years, it's not really, you're not really coming across as being that cool or progressive. You're kind of coming across as being the opposite. And what I have seen happen with that specific event is that now what has started as the teen area turned into the college age area. And now there's a lot of 30-year-olds who hang out in that area, as opposed to it going for the population that it was originally supposed to be for. And you can really see the participation has completely dwindled. And I think a lot of it is because they're just doing the exact same thing year after year after year, without really trying to bring in something different or unique. So really try to see what you can bring in. What are your different ideas? Especially with us having resources now like Pinterest, there are a million different ideas on Pinterest for anything you want to do. So really try to look and see what other types of things you can be bringing in and what other kind of activities you can bring and what's something new that you can do this year that you have never tried to do before. Really do that. And if you're having troubles coming up with ideas, if even Pinterest is just not helping you, then maybe it's time to bring in a new person and to see what ideas that new person might have. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. We have a joke at Buttermilk that sometimes our volunteers, or specifically our coordinators, will get relocated, which is when we just send them from one department to another department. And it's simply because sometimes people get burnt out, or they realize that they've done this area enough and they want to do something new, and that's just fine. So we have that happen with the kids tent as well. Some of my volunteers have gone on to do other areas at the festival, and that is just fine. And then I get to have new volunteers come in with new ideas, and that's where we really can have a lot of fun. So we really work on that, try to come up with something different that hasn't been seen before. Another big suggestion that I have too, if you're able to format this, is to have your med tent close to the kids tent. It seems that a lot of injuries, a lot of issues happen at the kids tent, and so it is very convenient when you have a med tent that is so close. That's something that really gives me a peace of mind. I think it's something that gives a lot of parents a peace of mind as well. And then, like I said, if we do have a child who is at the kids tent without their parents, then it is a lot easier for us to, and that child needs some medical attention, it's very easy for us to just walk the child a very short distance to get to the med tent. Also, there's a lot of times where I may notice something in a child, such as the festival that we do. There is poison ivy everywhere at this event, just poison ivy galore. And so after 24 hours, sometimes I start to notice that that child looks like they're coming down with a bad case of poison ivy. Obviously, I want that child to get poison ivy treated right away, because poison ivy is contagious from one child to another, one person to another. So if I notice that a child is coming down with poison ivy, I find that if I myself walk that child to the med tent, they actually get to the med tent, as opposed to just telling them that they should probably head over there at some point. That works out really great, and then we're able to treat the poison ivy and keep everyone a lot safer. So that's why having a med tent close to a kid's tent can really pay off. And I will also kind of tell you guys a story as well, for those that sometimes get shocked about the fact that we have children arrive to our kids' tent without their parents. I've had people ask me what our cutoff age is. Is there an age where we absolutely would not allow a child to be at the kids' tent unsupervised? And I kind of chuckle at that because I know that we have had some pretty young at our kids' tent without their parents. And so I usually say that we're not exactly sure what the age would be, but I have kicked out a 1-year-old who was at the tent without their parents. That was a situation where a child came kind of wandering from a trail and just wandered up to the sandbox and started playing with the sandbox. I noticed I didn't see any parents wandering behind the child. So what I did in that situation, and we're talking a 1-year-old who could actually walk, but a baby, I looked around, I asked if there were any other parents, any parents want to claim this 1-year-old child. This is way too young to be here without their parents. No parent in that area was able to claim the child. So then at that point, what I did for safety was I picked up the child myself, and I made sure not to put the child down until I found the parents. I walked around a larger circle. I walked up to all of the volunteers at the kids' tent, asked anyone if they knew who this child was or where this child was coming from. No one in the kids' tent knew. So at that point, also for my safety, I grabbed another volunteer. So there are 2 volunteers. I held the child, and I started walking around with the child because, of course, this was a situation where the parents had not registered their child. So I had no way of determining where this child had come from. So what I did was I started walking around the area. Luckily, I had a volunteer come up to me and say, okay, I think that child, I think his parents are vendors this weekend. So I started walking around the vendor area with this child, hoping a parent would claim their child, because we had no other way to find this child's parents. When I finally found the parents, they seemed a little confused because they had just sent their child to the kids' tent by themselves. They were a little confused that I wouldn't just allow their child to be at the kids' tent unsupervised. I had to tell them that I felt their child was just way too young to not be supervised, especially if the child is pre-verbal and in diapers, that is not appropriate. And then what I did at that point was I grabbed our child online registration information, and I came to the parents and I wrote all the information down, and I wrote on that child's wristband, and I told the parents to make sure their child kept their wristband on the entire weekend, because in that situation, I wasn't so certain I could trust the parents to watch their child. I also made a note in our registration on the bottom where I described the way the child looked. So that way, if the child did wander away without the parents and the parents were not searching for their child, we had a way of finding the child. We at least had a physical description if we found him without his wristband on. that in all the years, and the 9 years that I have done that festival, that is the only time I have encountered something quite that extreme. So it's not like I'm dealing with issues like that all the time, but it is definitely something that has happened. So, we just do what we can to try to prevent that from happening. Every once in a while, we have had it where one time we had a 3-year-old who was sent up to the kids' tent. I actually knew the 3-year-old. I knew the parents. I wasn't concerned. But the mom thought the dad was right behind. The dad thought the mom was right behind. We started to notice that it had been a little while that this child had been at the had been at the kids' tent by themselves. I wasn't too concerned, but I did decide it was time to find the parents. And so the parents were my friends. And when I went down, they were both actually quite embarrassed that had happened. So, that kind of thing does happen. We just keep an eye on it at the kids' tent. We don't worry about it too much. Obviously, if this were a situation where the parents could be very, very far away, I'm thinking about other events that I've been to where it would actually be inappropriate to have the kids there by themselves. Then that would be a different situation. But for us, it's not really something that we have to worry about quite that much. So if you guys have any questions, any comments, if you would like me to email my PowerPoint to you, I would love to do that. It's very easy for me to do. You can see that my email is right over there. So go ahead and email me. I will warn you, though, that I also decided to be an election inspector this year. So I thought it'd be fun and easy. I have been a little busy. So if it takes me a little bit of time to get back to you, sorry, but I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as I can. And then if you also would like to have a list of any performers that I have hired before and that I recommend, I would love to send those to you. If you ever want to see activities that we've done, I would also love to send those to you as well. So, and then if we get to the point where we're going back to having events and you would like to know how it is that we are doing these events, especially in any post-COVID times, I would love to have a chat with you or arrange a round table with other people who are trying to navigate how we're going to do children's events. When we can go back to doing that kind of thing, it's certainly going to be a new thing to try to figure out. So it's going to be an adventure. I know I didn't talk about it too much in my session because I just don't know. I just don't know what we're going to be encountering. But I do feel like with a lot of creative ideas and thinking outside the box, we'll be able to come up with some really great things for our youth to do. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the session. And be sure to tune in at 1:40 for our session on putting on a killer music series. I'd love to talk to you about how we're lining up bands and what kind of cool programs we're doing. And if I can figure it out, we'll even get to play some fun videos for you guys to watch. So thank you very much, and I will see you at 1:40.